Hey guys, this is Marcel Irnie reporting. Unfortunately, the fire marshal arrived, and so everybody standing has to leave. So we'll be waiting for the presentation. I will film it for everybody. We'll listen to what the doctors have to say. Today is December 13th, 2021 in Kelowna, BC.
So you're not alone in this. Is even when we have all the information, it's very difficult to get children and teens particularly not to do things which we think could kill them, and they're more worried about acne. Right? Now, many of the people here have been at rallies. They know almost as much as perhaps Dr. Hoffe does, but I doubt it. So we're here to give you information. And with that information, we hope that you will reach out to your neighbors. You'll get them to lean over the fence. When they start to have doubts, they'll lean over looking for that information, and then you will be ready to give it to them, okay? Because we really want to speak to is the parents. But we also want to speak to the grandparents. And we want to speak to the neighbors. And we want to speak to the community. Because these kids are our kids, right? Right. And we are hitting the road because they're going after them. They're after your 5 to 11-year-olds now. Yeah. It was bad enough when they went after the adolescents, In fact, that's a very vulnerable group. The 5 to 11-year-olds, the parents still have control. So we're actually sending all of you out, I guess, as emissaries to pass the word, to be informed, and to find the way to align yourself with your neighbors and to speak with them and to help them to protect their kids. Okay? So what do you need to know? First of all, is COVID dangerous for children? No. Yeah, you're right, it's not. We had 0 deaths from COVID in BC in anyone under the age of 19. In Canada, we had maybe 14 deaths with COVID. That usually means a positive PCR test, which that's a bunch of junk, right? So, those kids had other comorbidities. That's what killed them, not COVID. Do children get severe COVID? Rarely. It's about 0.2 per 100,000 children in ICU. It's a very small number. So they don't get very sick with this COVID. In fact, 3/4 of children that get COVID do not even have symptoms. And the other thing is, they rarely pass it to the other kids in their class, and they never pass it up to adults. So the safest place to be, if you're an adult, is a teacher in school. The biggest study they did was in Sweden. They found, looking at hospitalizations and ICU admissions, and the teachers did the best because the children protected them, because they didn't pass it around, they didn't give it to them. It was a very good place to spend your day. You're all in among the rest of us. So the question there is, do we have to give a shot to protect our grandparents, to protect our parents, protect our teachers? And the obvious answer there is until children get sequelae, in other words, they get things which last after they get a COVID. First of all, COVID's usually very, very mild in these kids, if they have symptoms at all. And the sequelae, such as lung conditions and so forth, don't last in kids. Not like we see sometimes in the elderly or middle-aged or whatever. So we have none of the conditions to give a shot. So now we have to ourselves, okay, no risk to these kids, right? COVID is not dangerous to them. They don't pass it up to you and up the chain to the people who are most vulnerable. So why are we giving them a shot? Well, we look at money, but there are many reasons behind this. You can go right down those rabbit holes to find out what's really behind this. Surveillance, et cetera, and money's only part of it. But I think we'll talk about this in a bit. Dr. Hoffe's going to talk to you about some of the things he's seen in his practice after people had these shots. Dr. Hoffe never gave anyone a shot. He knew enough beforehand. And that's the way we hope all doctors will be. But unfortunately, that's not the case. So what do they do? How do they make this? On the coronavirus, there's these things called spikes. That's why it's called a corona, because it has like a crown of these spike things sticking on it. So the spikes normally help the cell, the virus to kind of go into the cell and to replicate itself to come out again. But what they've done with the messenger RNA vaccine. We call it a vaccine, but I know you all know that it cannot prevent infection. You can still get the shot and get infection, and you can still give it. In fact, the number of viral particles in your nose are the same whether you're vaxxed or not vaxxed. But they took the spike protein, they created a messenger RNA which would go into your cells, hijack the mechanism for making proteins, and make more of these spikes. The idea being that those spikes would then get out into your circulation, they would warn your immune system so it would get a memory of it, and then when you were exposed to the real virus, you'd be prepared. That was the theory. But there was a problem with that theory. It didn't pan out in reality. Couple of problems, and I'm going to get Dr. Hoffe to tell you what he saw.
I feel like I'm standing on a pedestal. I just wanted to thank you all so much for coming out. We are here together for Canada. The future of Canada is in your hands, and every person needs to do whatever they can do to fight for our freedom. Dr. Malthouse had mentioned about that I was going to tell you what I've seen in my own patients. But I just want to echo what Dr. Maurice had said about how empty Royal Inland Hospital has been through this pandemic. When this pandemic started, well, firstly, let me tell you, I have lived and worked in Lytton in the Fraser Canyon for the last 28 years. As an emergency room doctor and as a family physician. And when this pandemic started, a work team arrived from Kamloops to create a negative pressure room in our emergency room where we were going to intubate all the dead and dying people with COVID that the ambulances were going to be bringing in. And we had to practice suiting up and suiting down and all of that horrendous PPE that you can hardly breathe and you can hardly see. And I didn't know how I was going to intubate anybody. I mean, I'm not good at it like Dr. Maurice is. I'm just a family doctor. But as an emergency room doctor, I was nervous because I was told that this was a killer virus and those people that were going to be brought in there breathing their last were going to be deadly because they were going to be shedding so many viruses. Well, I just want to tell you that 18 months after that pandemic started, when our emergency room was burned to the ground, we had not had one single COVID patient brought into our emergency room. Not one! That negative pressure room sat empty. The entire pandemic. It's now a pile of ash. This pandemic. Meanwhile, I now have 10 patients in my medical practice who are permanently disabled from their COVID shot. 10 people who were told that this vaccine was safe, whose lives are now ruined. And they tell us it is safe. We have 0 deaths from COVID, 1 dead from the vaccine, and 10 permanently disabled, and a whole bunch of others with ongoing problems since their first shot. And now those people are called they're now labeled as unvaccinated because they have refused to have more of what hurt them. So they are vaccine injured, yet considered to be unvaccinated, and are being punished like the rest of us for refusing to have these poisonous shots. As some of you might know, I am under investigation by the College of Physicians and Surgeons for the crime of causing vaccine hesitancy. This is a new crime in Canada. And I want to tell you that I was fired two months before that emergency room burned to the ground. I was fired after being an emergency room physician there for 28 years. I was fired for explaining to an emergency room nurse the scientific reasoning why a person who is fully immune to COVID from a natural infection does not need to be vaccinated. So I'm going to briefly tell you, for those of you that might not have heard it before, I want to tell you what I did to investigate what happened to my patients. Because when I started seeing seriously injured people coming into my office, I sent a letter to Dr. Bonnie Henry to ask her what was going on. I said, what is the mechanism of injury? And as these people's doctor, how do I treat it? And I got no reply. The matter was referred to a vaccine safety specialist who assured me that this was not from the vaccine. These were all coincidences. Our medical health authorities are vaccine injury deniers. And they are not interested in health. They are just interested in getting a shot into not just one shot, many, many shots into all of our children and all of us.
Criminals!
And now they are coming for our children. So I made some investigations about what seemed to be happening, and I discovered that contrary to the claims of the vaccine manufacturers, that 75% of this vaccine goes around your entire body in your circulatory system. It doesn't just stay in your arm, which means that those messenger RNA strands get into literally every part of your body where blood vessels go, which is your whole body. And so those little spike proteins that get produced because of that little gene sequence from the RNA are literally being formed in the cells around your blood vessels, so that those spikes end up in the cells around your blood vessels, which are therefore no longer smooth. They're full of spikes. And when you have spiky blood vessels, it is absolutely inevitable that blood clots will form. Because your platelets were designed to recognize damaged vessels and block them to stop the bleeding. They interpret that as an injury and the vessel needs to be blocked. So I set out to test this theory to see whether that, because that, if it was true, explained everything I saw in my patients. So I started doing a blood test called a D-dimer test, which we do in the emergency room if we suspect that somebody has a blood clot. And I found that more than 50% of people that had these shots had evidence of clotting. And these are not vaccine-injured people. These were people who had no side effects other than maybe feeling a bit tired, maybe a bit of a headache, maybe feeling vaguely sort of out of sorts for a couple of days. They thought their shot went fine. And 50% of them had evidence of clotting. And these clots, because they're in the capillaries, will not show on any scan. They are too small and they are too scattered, but the damage is permanent because clotted vessels never unblock. So the damage will accumulate with every booster. I have 6 people in my medical practice who now get shortness of breath when they walk. Things they could previously do before, they can no longer do. I am quite certain that those people got millions of blocked capillaries in their lungs. I have three people in my medical practice who tell me that both hands are so weak, symmetrically weak, that they cannot open a jar anymore. I have a lady in my practice who had to change the door handles in her house from round knobs to a lever type handle because even with both hands she is not strong enough to open a door if it has a round doorknob since her shot. So for that to happen, she had to have had that clotting in her spinal cord. These were people who were told these shots were to keep them safe, and they are now permanently disabled. The youngest of the patients that I've tested with this D-dimer is a 17-year-old boy from Vancouver who is very keen on soccer. I tried to persuade him not to take these shots, but peer pressure is an awesome thing. He wanted to be like his friends. And I had to phone him up when I got his blood test result to say to him, "You clotted." 17 years old. These are clot shots. They are clot shots. You might have heard of the myocarditis risk in young men. It happens in women too, but much more in young men, and the most vulnerable age group is the 16, 17 age group, but literally the teen years up to the mid-20s are at high risk. You could do a blood test called a troponin to detect how many people actually do get myocarditis, and it is literally 1 in 300 in that age group. It is not 1 in 200,000 like Bonnie Henry will tell you. These shots are doing permanent damage because heart muscle never regenerates. Just like lung tissue and brain and spinal cord, once they're injured, it is permanent. And the damage will add with every successive booster. These shots are lethal. And it is now known that 100% of all of the people killed by these vaccines, if you look, somebody has analyzed the lot numbers to see which shots were more lethal than others, and they found that 100% of the deaths came from 5% of the vaccine lots. So they're obvious. This is like Russian roulette. You never know what you're going to get. Some people are getting saline, and some people are getting the death shot. This is Russian roulette. These shots have now broken all records, have now that more people have died from these shots than from all the vaccines in history combined. And yet they tell us that these shots are safe. And now they're coming for our children. If you look at the VAERS, that's the Vaccine Injury Reporting System in the States, you will see that 19,500 people have died within a few days of their shots since this vaccine rollout began. And we know that that is only approximately 1% of the real number. Yeah. With almost 1 million vaccine injuries reported there. And in Canada, they will tell you safe because the vaccine injury reporting system in Canada is censored. I have filled out and sent in 14 vaccine injury reporting forms, and they get sent back to me to say, nope, these are all just coincidences. So doctors can't even report the injuries. Unfortunately, the medical health authorities are not honest. I don't know what else to say, but when you censor doctors from being able to report injuries, and they tell us we're supposed to report them, but when we try, they say, nope, no, this vaccine doesn't do that, that's just a coincidence. Yeah. This makes no sense at all. So I think what we should do now is we'll throw this open to questions. We'll just repeat the question, and we shouldn't go too long because people are getting cold here.
Happy to be here.
Okay. All right, you guys. Yeah, my heels will go through that. First of all, I want to take this opportunity to thank Pastor Art Lucier. Where are you? With one phone call, Art, Carrie, doctor's on tour, can you help? Yes! Thank God for pastors like Art Lucier. But there's even better news because we had double bonus because Art's holding his church here. Pastor Bong, where is he?
Donation bucket.
He allowed us to have use of the church. And because I'm on a roll with 3 good news items, I have more good news, and you're going to have to help me. You can take the green sign out. Thanks. They have allowed us to have the church again tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock. Now, I haven't told these guys yet, so are you game for that? Okay. Yeah, because otherwise you have to tell them you won't be here. Yeah. Oh, they'll be here. Hard 180, you guys. So he or she who is here first gets a seat, okay? Hard 180. Now, again, the most important thing is you make sure you reach out and keep in touch with us, okay? Because We're literally, our day starts at 5 o'clock in the morning and goes till 2 o'clock every day. We have been on Vancouver Island, we were in Duncan, we were in Victoria, we were in, then we went over to Powell River. Yeah, nice little short cruise there, awesomely beautiful. Back to Black Creek, over here, drove up this morning. This is for every day, okay? Then we're into Sorrento, Squamish, Pemberton, up to Terrace, okay? This is busy time, so please help us by giving us your names, okay? When we ignite recall, an initiative, it is a doable. It is a people power legislation, you guys. But it is designed to fail, okay? Unless you are highly organized and ready to go. There are time limits. There is criteria to meet, okay? If you are not a registered voter at this moment in time, your first assignment is go and become a provincial voter, okay? Because you won't be able to sign the petition unless you are, all right? I will need a team of volunteers in every constituency in this province. If you are willing to help as we get closer to that time, please just step up. This is no time for shyness. This is no time for humming and hawing. Canada is in crisis.